From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Love and cross-checks.
Today with special guest Ken Lewis, martial arts instructor and key witness in the case of the 1993 murder of Veronica Estrada. Remember, if you've got a tip for Melissa on anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And now here's your host, serving up slices of justice the way Claim Jumper serves up chocolate motherlode cake, only with better service and without judging you with her eyes, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Oh, I'm judging you.
You are?
Totally judging you.
Why?
Because I wish the motherlode cake were mine.
Oh, I see.
And I wish I were serving it up.
Yeah, well.
Oh, motherlode cake. I think we drove past.
We did.
Yeah, and they're
well,
closed.
it looked like they were closed, but I couldn't remember the name of that cake, so I had to look it up.
It is motherlode,
and
you're
it is,
right.
but they're showing that they're still open. The one near us is still open.
That's weird.
It looked like it was abandoned.
It did. It very much did. And Claim Jumpers is like, I hate to say it, their food is pretty good. Yeah. And it's, it
is.
The portion size is monumental, and that motherlode cake is about 6 layers or something. Yes. They call it like a slice, but it's basically
it
feeds
it's an entire cake.
It is an entire cake. It feeds like a tiny family of 7.
Right. And you have 3 bites of it, and it's so rich. You just, I'm done.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, I would think you would get the motherlode cake and keep it for a couple days because you would pass out.
You have to take it home. But it's like the pancakes we get. What's the name of that place?
The Griddle.
The Griddle, right.
Oh, I miss the Griddle.
Yeah, in
for
Hollywood.
Any of you Southern California residents, I guess it's Hollywood or right on the border of West Hollywood.
It's right on the border.
It's Crescent Heights and Sunset.
It's Fairfax and Sunset.
Oh, Fairfax and Sunset.
Yeah.
It's right near the DGA, the Directors Guild of America. And,
right next door.
And they open early, like 7, and like at 6 a.m. people are lined up around the corner.
Yep.
They have a creepy little parking lot in the back, and you get a pancake the size of, I'm trying to remember, what did producer Mark call it? A hubcap, yeah.
It's the size of a hubcap.
Oh, I miss it so much.
It's a cake.
It is. And they have a really interesting, unique, I feel like it's difficult to be in the food industry now because you have to be so creative.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like, here's your buttermilk pancake, don't choke on it, fuck off. It's like, like the one I loved was called Mounds of Love, and it was like a Mounds bar.
Oh,
it was coconut and dark chocolate. They had one called like Hot for Teacher that had like apples. Producer Mark actually liked something called the El Caballero, which was like
it's not pancakes.
It was a burrito.
It's a giant breakfast burrito.
It was like the size of your femur.
Yeah,
it was like...
Yeah.
I've never seen a burrito. I don't know where they get the tortillas. They
may have the made special for them. I don't know.
I think they'd have to.
I hope we're talking about it. I hope they're still open.
I do too. I'm sure they are.
Because it's an amazing joint.
It is. Yeah. How did this get started? This is your fault. Oh yeah, motherlode cake.
Motherlode cake.
Anyway,
we're talking about food.
Stop it.
I'm hungry.
Me too, brother.
We're recording this close to lunchtime.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Me too. So before we, get too far off a field, I wanted to say thank you to our wonderful tipsters for all of your emails, your ratings, your reviews, subscribing to this podcast. We're really grateful to have you. If you have a case idea that you would like us to cover, please feel free to email us at jttipsters@gmail.com. You can call the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. And we're very grateful if you could take the time to rate or even a little more time and give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's a gift to us that we, can't thank you enough for, and it helps other people find us. And we, don't have an advertising budget, so we're putting it all on your shoulders. It's all your responsibility. I'm just kidding. But we are really grateful to the tipsters. We really can't thank you enough. And this case came to us, interestingly enough, from Detective Hanky. At some point, we will be able to tell you his real name. It's not Hanky,
We're getting closer and closer to getting him to agree to actually appear on the podcast.
He's so humble. He just.
I'm gonna take him aside. I'm gonna
and beat him.
No, he'll kick the shit out of me.
He will kick the shit out of you. He's a tall, looks like a very strong man. I wouldn't fuck with him.
He's an experienced homicide
detective.
I'm not gonna,
and a martial artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't fuck with him either. Yeah. But maybe when he retires, but that probably won't ever happen. He won't retire. But he's a sly little devil. And he sent me a message. It's like, hey, are you familiar with this case up near you? And I'm like, what? So it happened in 1993, and I moved here in 2007. So I was like, no, of course I don't know about this. And he was looking for one specific thing, an article in our local publication. And I went down a rabbit hole, and I blame him completely. But it was a fascinating rabbit hole, and I kept digging and digging. And it turned out that one of the main witnesses in this case, who had moved out of state, was coming back for a visit like a few days after I contacted him. So even though there was a pandemic, and even though we could potentially have been in the same space, we were able to do a interview with Ken Lewis, who, as you will hear, was the owner of the Taekwondo studio where the two people in this case were both instructors. Now, it's the case of Veronica Estrada, who was a beautiful, small, accomplished, exquisite woman with a lot of talent and a lot of dreams. And she was 29 years old when she was found murdered along the side of a main road here in Santa Clarita. We live in a, fairly small town, and it's a paved road. It's not like, we're on the set of Gunsmoke, but it's,
But no, it is a main artery.
Yeah.
It's called Soledad Canyon Road.
It is.
It's actually part of one street that it turns into Valencia Boulevard, which is, it's all one road, and it's like 3 lanes on each side. It's like a 6-lane road. So it's probably one of, if not the major artery, one of the major arteries here in Santa Clarita.
It really is. And back in December of 1993, it was two lanes on each side, and it did not have street lights. So that lets you know.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Veronica's case is one of the reasons there are street lights now in our part of Soledad Canyon Road, because it was not very well lit. There were some lights from some strip malls and some businesses, but still fairly rural, and it kind of crosses what is known as the Wash, which is the Santa Clara River, I believe it is.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and it's mostly dry, except when it rains, and it just becomes a little bit damp. But yeah, so Veronica was walking home after work one day from the Taekwondo studio, and she never made it home. And this is a rare opportunity for a podcast to get to speak to someone who not only was a friend, a mentor, an employer of both the victim and the person of interest, but he is the person, along with a few other people who were searching for her, who found Veronica, which I can't imagine what that has meant in his life, how it affected him. But he is a wonderful, eloquent spokesperson for her case. He couldn't be a better person to talk about her case. He's kind of magical in that he knows a lot of details, and yet he keeps a very even hand. He doesn't just come right out and say, I know this is who did it and I know why. He has theories, and he understands the personalities of the people we're speaking of. He was just the perfect person to interview. And, it wasn't filled with innuendo and rumor. He knows the facts. He knows a lot of facts. So it was a true blessing to get to discuss this with Ken Lewis. And I know you're going to enjoy this interview. And this is the case of Veronica Estrada. So we're really grateful today to have as a guest Mr. Ken Lewis. And he was a very important part of a case that is local to me, and he will explain how he is involved. But I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Lewis, right now for taking time out of your day. I know you were a Santa Clarita resident and then now you live on the East Coast, but ironically, you were in town when all of this information came to me. And here we are in the same city, but, COVID. So we're talking from our respective places right now. But it's so nice to have you back in Southern California. Thanks for being here, Mr. Lewis.
Well, it's tough being here from New Jersey, but I guess the Southern California weather I'll have to deal with.
You'll suffer through it? Yeah, that's good.
Yes, I will.
So let's go back to the early 90s, and Ken Lewis owns a Taekwondo studio in Santa Clarita, in Canyon Country specifically, where I live, and you have some instructors that you are very fond of and that work very hard and achieve a lot of success. So tell me a little bit how you started the studio, a little bit about you.
So me and my brother both took martial arts. My brother was actually the higher rank, and he started the studio, and I was actually teaching out in the Valley. And then he needed to move to headquarters, and so then I took over the studio. It was only about a year old or so when I took it over. And I took it over. We went from about 60 students to 280 active students.
Wow.
And I moved the location. And I was really young, so I didn't know what I was doing, but I had some grand ideas, and a lot of them worked. But I think most people just knew that I really cared about people and cared about my students. So I grew up one of the largest studios in the country at the time, and we had a lot of great young instructors and a couple more mature instructors. But I was pretty young myself at the time. I think I started at 23 or 24 years old.
Wow.
Running my own business, maybe even younger than that. And, I think all this took place 94, so I had to be in the 25-year-old range, 26-year-old range.
You were young. I have to say a little backstory of how this came to me. A LA County Sheriff's Department cold case detective asked me to find one specific article for him. He has recently inherited Veronica's case, and he said, "Hey, girl, are you familiar with this case?" And I was like, "Well, no, I didn't move to Santa Clarita till 2007." And he said, could you find this article where in the Signal, which is our local newspaper, where
Correct.
Yes, where an alternative suspect may have there was a sketch because of some, which we're going to get into later, why that isn't even viable. But what it led me to was a rabbit hole, and I found all of the articles and all of Veronica's on Veronica from the Signal, from the LA Times. It became a very, very big case in that time, especially for this area. And I was just, when I read the bizarre details of the two trials and what happened, I was like, I am in. I am all in. So I've spoken.
It was bizarre.
Very bizarre.
It actually was on Current Affair too, the old TV show.
I think it was
so they
covered.
Did an episode of it.
I think it was covered by a couple of national shows and some national press, which I will talk about later, because it happened. The trials happened to have been at the same time in LA County while the Heidi Fleiss trial and the O.J. Simpson trial were going on. They actually compared Stuart Milburn's two trials to those trials. So, but that's further down the line. So backtracking, I read about the case and was horrified about what happened. Even more horrified when I read that about the two hung juries. But the person who kept coming up most often was you, and that you were a very important part of this case. And what you're saying is true, that you had built, your studio into something big and beautiful, because honestly, anyone I spoke to, and not to, like fluff your feathers, but they all adore you. You were, very in the community, in the fitness community, in the martial arts community, you are so well respected. And I even offhandedly mentioned to our contractor, Dan, hey, you've lived here your whole life. Do you remember this case of Veronica? And before I can finish, he goes, Estrada? Yes. So he remembered the case, and he's a friend of yours and thinks the world of you. And so you had built this studio into something big and wonderful. And you have these two instructors who are very well thought of. And Veronica is 29 and Stuart is 27. And from all accounts, they had started as, friends, but there became like a rivalry. And Veronica, and that's just one theory, Veronica was an amazing champion. 4'11", came to martial arts through a side door. She wanted to be a dancer, but she was a little too petite. She, was going to college. She had been married once before, and her ex-husband was into martial arts. And it sounds like she then practiced martial arts and surpassed him many times over. So tell us about Veronica as one of the instructors at your studio.
So I don't know where that background came from, because I don't know that background of her. However, her and her husband took Taekwondo from us. We actually had a club at the First Baptist of Van Nuys, where my brother and I went to church, and they actually took Taekwondo from us at that club location. And then he only made it up a certain amount of distance, and then she went a lot further.
Yes.
So I think his martial arts, he was a military guy, I believe, and his martial arts was from us also.
Okay.
I don't think he had any previous training.
Okay. So you're sort of working with Veronica, and you're fostering her, and you're seeing how she is progressing. So tell us about her and how this, how sort of came about that she was, voted instructor of the year and was working on national championships. And tell us a little bit about her.
So there was different concepts of tournaments. So at that time, there was mainly forms, which are patterns that we do, and fighting. And at 4'11", fighting's a little difficult, but she held her own in the fighting department. But she was an amazing forms competitor. And so she went to nationals and would win at nationals and tons of regional tournaments. And she also ran our Little Dragons program for the smallest kids.
Yeah, she was an instructor to the young. Yeah, she was an instructor to the youngest kids, right?
She was, and she did a phenomenal job with them.
So is Stuart an employee at the same time also, or did one of them start earlier than the other? They started at the same time. How did they kind of, start working for you?
They both went up through the ranks, trained up through the ranks, and basically entered our instructor training program for several years, and then became instructors and continued just to move up and assist at the studio. So let's go back, and we may jump forward and backward in time, but let's go back to December of 1993. So the story goes that Veronica leaves around 8 p.m., leaves the studio. Were you there that night? I believe I was, yes.
And she lived fairly close to the studio, so she was walking home, potentially maybe because she'd had an argument with her boyfriend, Eddie. And
correct.
And the theory is that another instructor, Stuart Milburn, had left also at 8, saying that he wasn't feeling well. And before we know it, Veronica doesn't make it home. And her boyfriend, Eddie, calls the studio at 9 and says, is Veronica there? And he is informed that she had left at 8. Now, someone calls Eddie, a woman calls Eddie, because she has found Veronica's wallet on the side of Soledad. And he knows there's a problem. She is missing. She has not come home, and someone's found her wallet. Now, the next morning, you, Stuart Milburn, her coworker, and another woman go looking for her. So it's the next morning, and are you walking on foot on Soledad Canyon?
We are. So what I had decided to do, so first the wallet thing, of course this was 30 years ago, so
yeah,
or more than that.
You're doing a good job.
The wallet thing, I don't remember someone finding that night. So it may be in the records they did.
Mm-hmm.
I know I got a phone call that night, but the only phone call I got was she hadn't come home, but they had a fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so our assumption was she went to her sister's house or to her friend's house.
Right.
And there wasn't an overwhelming amount of concern that night. So unless the wallet was found after that point, later in the night or early morning. And then early in the morning, I got a call that the wallet was found and she was still missing and she hadn't gone to any of the residents. So a lot of us had gone down to the Taekwondo studio to meet and figure out, what can we do? How can we help look for her and find her? Everyone who has telephone numbers on her and her friends, we're all calling. And I decided that I would walk the path that she would have walked home. So the conversation I had with Eddie was, yes, they argued. She said she was just walking home. She didn't want him to pick her up.
Mm-hmm. So
or the argument was over being picked up, one or the other.
Right.
So, but I know that she had left to walk home that night.
Right.
So then I was getting ready to go out and, like we just call him Milburn. We call everyone a lot by their last name.
Last name, sure.
So Milburn said he'd go with me. As I'm walking past the grocery stores, I said I'm going to go check in all the dumpsters behind the stores just to see if I see anything. And Milburn had told me he's already checked all the dumpsters this morning, so there was nothing in the dumpsters.
Uh-huh.
So then we walked down. We went under the bridge there, right there by Camp Plenty in Soledad,
mm-hmm.
Just to make sure nothing under the bridge. And we walked through the area down there. Well, when we got ready to go up, walking, I don't even know which direction that is, but on the left side, we start to go up, and Milburn goes, I'm going to go to the right side and walk.
Okay.
And, at the time that made sense. So he's going to go walk down the right side of the road. I'm going to go walk down the left side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
It was, 2 lanes, a small median, and 2 lanes.
Right.
A lot different looking than it is now, though.
Right.
Because on the wash side, it's just all shrubbery.
Right.
But really low cut. And on my side, it was really high bushes before the railroad tracks.
Okay.
So I start walking down, and I see a jacket laying on the sidewalk. And so I pick up her jacket, and she's a small lady,
mm-hmm.
obviously.
Right.
And I pick up the jacket, and I'm looking at the jacket like, this has got to be a kid's jacket. And
right.
Milburn actually was blind in one eye, and he had struggle vision in the other eye, had some very thick glasses.
Right.
And from 4 lanes across in the median, he yelled across to me that was her jacket.
Interesting.
So then he comes across the road, and I actually go start looking down at the bushes by where the jacket was. And he follows me, and then he goes a different direction than where the body was.
Yeah.
I saw some clothing sitting in the top of a bush. I walked back up to the sidewalk, walked down to where the bush was. I see her body down there, right. And I walk down, I touch her. She's obviously cold and purple, and I walk back up. Milburn's walking towards me, and then, we didn't have cell phones yet, so
right.
I told him to run down to the store and call 911 and get the sheriffs down there. A couple days later, thinking about how he was always away from finding anything, mm-hmm. was interesting to me.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
So then the sheriffs pull up real quick. But at that time, there's no homicide department in Santa Cruz. I don't know if there is now, but at that time, there was no homicide department. So they took him and I, put us in a car, took us down to the sheriff's office, but then stuck us in different rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there for like 7 or 8 hours, if I recall correctly.
Wow.
They wouldn't let us talk to each other.
Of course not.
And then, when the homicide got done at the scene, they came and talked to us. They're trying to find out. We found the body, so
Right.
we're obviously the first suspects.
Of course.
So, so they're not going to give us any information, but they did ask a lot of questions, and
Sure.
we're pretty open and forthright with them.
Right.
He did describe how she was laying and the clothing and stuff like that. And what I told the sheriffs was he never came down to the body.
Well, that's a good point. I have some other points, but yeah, that's a good one.
So that's one of the things that started bringing attention. And if I recall correctly, they did tell me that day.
That he had described.
That he said, right, that he had described.
Now, did you?
And I let him know that he wasn't.
Okay.
I'd never let him down there because I didn't want the scene to be disturbed at all.
Of course. Yeah, you're kind of a magical witness. You're the kind of, witness who finds someone that people in law enforcement are indebted to because you don't do anything to disturb the scene. You understand the importance of you backing out of it. So, yeah, it's a magical thing. So, did you notice at any point when both of these instructors were at your studio that there was any acrimony between them?
They weren't best of friends, but everyone got along with everybody. Some of the reports, even the ones trying on TV, they were trying to make an issue of that, and I don't think that had anything to do with anything. You
don't? Okay, now that's interesting. No. So you don't think it was a jealousy thing? You think it was something else? What else do you think it could be? Well,
the one thing I would tell everybody back then, and I was young, but I think I was somewhat wise on this point, was we don't know what's in the mind of someone who would kill someone. If
Right.
we could understand it, then we probably could have foreseen it.
Right.
There was nothing that we could see that would say this was going to ever take place. The jealousy may have been she had just gotten the Instructor of the Year award, and so that was brought up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And he really wanted that award,
mm-hmm.
But she deserved it more than he did.
Right.
So, but it wasn't a vote thing. I'm the one who decides.
Okay.
I decide the awards. I have a conversation with just about everybody and a lot of students and stuff, but I'm the director and owner of the studio, so I decide who gets what. So, the theory was if he was upset at her for getting the award, it wouldn't be at her, it would be at me for giving her the award.
Right.
Someone had contacted me a couple weeks before and said that he was having an improper relationship with a young lady who wasn't of age. And so I called him in my office and I said, if I ever find out that there's any truth to this whatsoever, you're gone, and I will make sure that the authorities know about it. So there's some speculation that somehow they got into an argument and she knew about the relationship, and she was, even though she was walking home, that she may have turned around to come back and tell me.
Oh, okay. Now that's an interesting theory. I had not heard that. Well, he had said, like on the stand that he didn't respect her, that he didn't dislike her, but he didn't respect her, which sounds like something you might say if maybe you were spurned, maybe, or, I don't know. Well, again, speculation, but yeah.
Yeah, I think they're, diving into his history and past, that his complete respect of womankind wasn't real high. So
I think that's interesting.
And then when she's 4'11" and he's 6'1" or whatever he is, then, you just look at him like, and people got to understand this, black belt doesn't mean you can beat everybody. Black belt means that you've achieved a level within yourself that is way better than what you were. But, it's like I had parents all the time bring their kids in and say, yeah, I want my kid to be able to defend themselves in case someone tried kidnapping them. I'm like, you do know your kid's 6. There's nothing I can teach that child that can beat an adult.
Right.
So
that's my next question. So I knew there was a great height differential between the two, and they were, he's a male and he is, an accomplished instructor and martial artist, and she is a very petite female. It's absolutely been reported in so many different publications, like she would be difficult to take down because of her prowess. And I'm like, if someone comes at you from behind, or if someone knows, specific holds.
And if you didn't ever expect it to happen. So
there you go.
One of the things we teach in self-defense is, and people always ask me, could I walk up to you and hit you and you not know it? I'm like, well, if I wasn't expecting it, yeah. I'm not walking around on high alert at all times.
Right.
So when you're at different alert levels, then your self-defense would be at different levels. If someone just walked up behind me on the street, and I'm a big boy now, I'm 6'2", 300 right now. If someone walked up behind me on the street and grabbed me in a certain chokehold, I got like 10 seconds to figure it out, or I'm done.
Right.
So, if you're not expecting to be choked, if you're not expecting to be attacked, then it's much harder to defend yourself.
Right.
If you are expecting, and they've been around each other for years and years and years, so there couldn't have been any expectation that this was ever going to turn violent.
Right. And she was walking home. Obviously, her mind is on her relationship or her fight with Eddie. It's like she wasn't, as you say, on high alert. She's not like waiting for someone to come at her from out of the bushes or, whatever. And she, she's walking home. So thinking back to that evening.
And it was Santa Cruz. So Santa Cruz was one of the safest places in the country to live.
No kidding. Always. You never think that's going to happen around here. So that evening, he said that he had left early because he didn't feel well and wanted to go home. Again, he changes his story, which we'll get to a little later, with an ex-girlfriend, and says that he was at a record store that was near the studio.
So there was one actually attached to our studio.
Okay.
So we're in a building that had four stores in the little shopping center, and they were connected to us. And they were a video record store.
Okay. So now there's
and he did check out videos, but there's questions on that too.
Oh, okay. Now that I was not aware of. I'd always heard it was a record store, not a video record store. And it's interesting that that there may be a paper trail that he had checked videos out. So there were three apparently witnesses, two women who were driving around the area at the time, and one who was a resident who ends up being problematic as a witness later on, a male. These two females have differing stories, but yet they kind of coalesce and come together, that they had seen someone pull quickly out of a parking lot of a strip mall, like they were chasing someone. And another woman said that she saw someone dragging a human being down an embankment. Both of these women and the gentleman who later on becomes problematic pick Stuart Milburn's picture out of a lineup.
Right. So, and that was one of the challenges of the whole case. And I went every day to the trial, and then every morning they kicked me out because they didn't want me to sit there and hear everything. And then every night I got basically the whole full story in writing of what everybody said, and I would read through it every night. And then meet with the detectives and the prosecutors and talk to them about what I knew was a lie, what I felt was a lie, stuff like that.
Exactly. You are a really important cog in this wheel. So is there any chance that Eddie Hockaday, her boyfriend, could have seen her on the road walking home and done this?
When people say, is there any chance, you never know, but I would highly think not.
Now, I don't have a description of Eddie Hockaday, so I don't know what he looks like.
He's a pretty small guy.
Pretty small. Okay. Because the witnesses describe the person that they see in different areas on Soledad as tall, athletic, and either blonde or redheaded. As Stuart Milburn's a ginger. He's a redhead, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And you explained earlier that he had vision issues, so he wore glasses. I know one of the witnesses said he wore glasses but described a different style frame, which I'm going to say I'm not sure how good they always say in television shows that eyewitnesses are the worst, kind of witness. It's now a common thing that there are cameras everywhere, and that's very helpful. You can't really fight a camera. But, it's like, well, he's blonde, he was redheaded, his glasses were this shape. No, they were this shape. I mean, I don't know how good of a look these witnesses could have gotten, because it's December, it's 8:00, it's got to be dark. I think
it was.
And I believe, because of Veronica's case, that the city has actually placed more streetlights along Soledad because of
there was no streetlights at the time.
Okay, so that's
at that section.
That's difficult, I think, to use eyewitness accounts at a time. It was.
So here's where the eyewitnesses, to my understanding, came into play at. So the rumor was he parked at the little strip mall at the next corner down there.
Uh-huh.
And he ran across the road in front of the cars, and their headlights hit him.
There you go.
And they made a description based on the headlights hitting him. Or the first one of the two witnesses. I think it's one of the guy and maybe the girl. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then, to my understanding, another girl saw someone being attacked, called 911, and the sheriff's went and looked at the wrong side of the street.
Right.
And didn't check anything else.
Yeah, that's
so she was concerned enough to actually make a phone call, which tells you that at least she got a little bit better look on it. But even in the most logical sense, and I believe in my heart that he did it, but the witnesses were shaky at best.
We'd had a prior conversation, which I was really happy to get to talk to you, and that you said, I understand why it was a hung jury. The witnesses were crap. I mean, it turned out, to be...
Well, once they got rid of the evidence, most of the evidence in the case, then...
Well, we'll talk about that, too, about what happened there.
And, you're relying on those three witnesses to be the sole evidence in the case,
right? Which is,
and I can see how you could pick those. I could pick those apart, and I'm not even trained as a lawyer.
Exactly. I get what you're saying. That is an interesting thought, though. That at least one of the females, I believe, she was a student at the College of the Canyons, and she was driving down Soledad. And you're right, I'd forgotten she had actually seen someone dart across Soledad, 4 lanes and a median, as you described, and she got him in the headlights. So that makes more sense to me. So Eddie...
Right, because there was no lighting out there.
Yeah, apparently. Thank goodness there's changes now. It's a shame that it has to come to something like that before there's a change made. But yeah, it's, you're right. It looks different now, but it was, a little more rural. It's still not very, built up, but it's obviously different than it was back then. But she should have felt safe to walk home from the studio. There shouldn't have been an issue with anyone, waiting. So, when I say, is there a chance Eddie Hockaday could have done it? I'm just trying to give alternate, things here just to try and explain why it really points toward Stuart Milburn. It could have been a random person. I don't see that happening, like a random person waiting and a small woman is walking alone, home along this, 4-lane road. It just doesn't feel like a random attack. It feels more personal to me, but
Yeah. And no one involved in the case ever felt like it was a random attack.
A random attack. I don't think anyone thought it did either, but I just am, throwing different things out there. So I will tell you the article that the detective asked me to find, and our local paper, The Signal, is going through some changes. Their building that they were housed in is being demolished. I'm not sure if they've moved to a new building, but they are transferring all of their files over to newspapers.com. But the article that the detective had tasked me to find was an impossibility. And I spoke to the managing editor, who is a great guy. His name is Tim White. He was actually at the Signal starting from 1989. He was there till, I think it was about 2006 maybe, and he left for 10 years to start his own consulting company and came back to the Signal in 2016. And so he's now the managing editor. And he said, I vaguely remember the story. I will try and find the article, and he has not been able to. And he said, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage here because our files on microfiche are being transferred over to newspapers.com, and yet some of them don't seem to be transferring over. So technology is a great thing and sometimes a pain in the ass. So it's not.
So which article was it? And I'll tell you what it said.
Okay, so here's what happened. It was an article about the defense attorney trying to find alternate suspects to clear Stuart's name, and that there was an attack on a College of the Canyons student not long after Veronica's attack. Now, here's the thing. The College of the Canyons is in Valencia, and there is a satellite campus now in Canyon Country, but it was not open then. So it was on the Valencia campus. It wouldn't have been the Canyon Country campus. And I ended up speaking to the public safety director, who is a wonderful woman, but she basically was like, I can't give you much more without a court order. And I'm like, well, I don't need a court order, and what you've given me is great. So here's what she gave me. I called her and said, I am trying to get this article from the Signal that this detective is positive was printed in the Signal that named a description, that had a description of someone who attacked a female on your campus. And she said, well, there were two. And I was like, oh, there were two attacks? And she said, yeah, there were two on the Valencia campus. And I said, I see. And she said, and I remember Veronica's case. I was here then. So I'm really blessed in my rabbit hole digging to find people who lived here then and live here now and know a lot of the information. And she said the LA County Sheriff's Department had an artist rendering of the suspect. And I said, I see. And that was printed in the Signal article. She remembered distinctly because she's the public safety director of the College of the Canyons. And I said, do you remember what the person looked like? She goes, yeah. Not that tall and brunette and potentially white or Hispanic, had on long shorts and socks with slide-in sandals. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't anywhere near it. And I believe, right. I could be mistaken, but I actually believe one of the attacks actually took place before the Estrada murder.
Oh, maybe I thought she had said, I'm not either. I will be honest, I'm not either. But I thought they were both after. But yeah, his defense attorney, doing what they should do, tries to find everyone else they can throw under the bus, except that.
Yeah, I think that one was shown pretty much that didn't have anything to do with anything. Well, I don't think anyone fell for that one in trial.
And I think the detective who has the case now is trying to cross every T and dot every I. He's a very detail-oriented human. I know him and his work, and I know he wants to find everything he can. So I was just trying to help him find this, drawing that I'm hoping he can find in the LA County Sheriff's Department, files somewhere, a drawing, an artist rendering of who attacked the women on the campus, because it sure didn't sound at all like it looked like Stuart Milburn at all. I mean,
no.
Yeah. yeah, I get that.
There was a lot of reasons why they weren't connected at all. So,
right.
I think that was pretty easy to
debunk.
Prove incorrect.
Yeah. Well, his attorney is doing what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So now getting to the evidence, as you had mentioned earlier, this is one of those things that is like just cracks your heart in half. And it, I don't want to dig around in a bunch of conspiracy theories, even though we all are going to have some. It could have just been human error, but what a giant fuck up. So you found the jacket, and I was under the impression she still had upper body clothing, but when you found her, she had no clothing, correct?
I believe that to be true. So we had these, I believe they were yellow.
They were.
Martial arts suits.
Yep.
And they're like warm-up suits.
Yep.
And when I found her jacket, that brought me to the bushes. While I was in the bushes, down on the top of another bush was her clothing.
Mm-hmm.
So then I walked back up to the sidewalk and walked down to where her clothing was, and that's where I found her body. So it is my belief that there was some guilt involved, and so they wanted me to find the body, or they wanted someone to find the body. So they put the jacket, and one of the things I don't know if it's in the paperwork or not, I told the detectives that the jacket, it was a very cold morning, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
The jacket wasn't cold. So when I found the jacket, it felt like it had just been put out there.
Oh, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. That I didn't have that information.
The jacket on the sidewalk, then the clothing. The jacket led me to basically the clothing, and then the clothing led you to the body. Now, I've never done anything to anybody like that, but I don't think if you were trying to rape or kill someone that you're going to take their clothes off and then put it all the way at the top of a 5-foot tall bush so that everyone can know where it's at.
No, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. So you're right. The warm-up suit was yellow, I guess, with a black stripe down the side, potentially. And
yes.
That was also described distinctly by one of the eyewitnesses. That it was like, I saw a yellow, outfit with a black stripe. So maybe they had seen Veronica walking and noticed that, and then, that's what you found, her clothing. So, yeah. So you and Stuart were held for, questioning for several hours, which makes perfect sense since you were, the people that found her. And what is very interesting is that the next evening, Stuart calls an ex-girlfriend and for comfort. And he says to her, I didn't respect her. We didn't, really get along, but I sure didn't want anything to happen to her. And then he proceeds to tell her that Veronica was killed around 8:15, that she had been bludgeoned in the back of the head, and that she had been strangled. And she at first is hearing that he says, oh, I came home early. I wasn't feeling well. And then by January of 94, he is telling her, oh, I'd gone to the record store. So his timeline and his alibi changed. And when his ex-girlfriend heard that obviously the homicide detectives had not released the cause of death, I mean, the manner of death is homicide, but the cause of death had not been released to anyone. And the fact that Stuart knew exactly what happened.
Correct.
That's pretty fascinating, because I'm going to guess when you found her, you didn't automatically pull out a microscope and say, I think she's been strangled and bludgeoned.
No. Like I said, I moved straight out of there. He did go to the record store. Like I said, I thought it was a video store. Because I think he rented a couple of videos. But what we think he did is right after the event, we think he ran in there to create an alibi. Because the 2 videos that he rented weren't videos that he would rent.
Right. So he just picked something up to make it. Yeah.
They were like children's videos. It was like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or something. And that's just not even his personality.
Okay.
So, when I say we, I'm always referring to, I believe I had these conversations with people.
Right.
But this is what I remember thinking.
Right, of course.
So the 2 videos, I think it was 2 that he rented. There's a timeline that puts him obviously at the video store to a certain amount of time, but we think he just ran in, got the videos, and was trying to do an alibi. That
actually sounds very smart. That sounds very smart. So the fuck up is that the clothing that you found was part of it was ordered to be destroyed by a lieutenant with the LA County Sheriff's Department to the coroner's office. So there's part of her clothing, but part of it was destroyed. Do you think that there was some sort of definitive evidence on there that, could have been helpful?
Not back then,
right.
But had that been saved, with the DNA concepts now,
right?
There's no telling what they could have found off that.
So yeah.
It should have never been destroyed. And what I was told back then was it accidentally got destroyed as being just an old case. Well, it sounds like they didn't destroy all the old case stuff anyway.
Well,
so why would that happen?
And I got to be honest.
I don't know how it worked 40 years ago or 30 years ago.
Mistakes happen. We get it. People are human. The LA County Sheriff's Department Homicide Bureau is the largest homicide bureau in the country. I get it. There's a lot that goes on there. But that did seem to be a giant fuck up. And it's startling to me because murder trials today can take 3-5 years before they even come to trial. By January of 94, Stuart is known as the person of interest, and then he's arrested in March. He comes up for his first trial in April. It's a month later, and he is brought to trial. And the first trial ends in a hung jury. And it's pretty bizarre that it takes 1 month of deliberations. Now, after apparently 5 days, the jurors came back and said, we're at a deadlock. And the judge said, get the hell back in there. And they're there. It's 19 days of deliberating over 30 days. So for a month, they, are deliberating and it goes back and forth. It's, 8-4, it's 10-2. It goes back and forth as far as, conviction, who's going to convict him. But they just say it's not going to happen. We're at a deadlock. So it's a mistrial's declared. And then in September of 1994, the second trial starts. And there is a blood smear on the article of clothing that's still that hadn't been destroyed. I believe it's the pants that did not belong to Veronica and did not belong.
See, that part's interesting to me because I was under the impression that all of it had been destroyed.
No,
I knew there was a blood smear on a piece of clothing, but I don't believe that piece of clothing was ever at a trial. So do you know differently?
I believe that only half of the clothing was destroyed. I believe it's the pants. Oh, okay. I believe it was the upper body clothing. And I will tell you, I have heard two different things, that she still had like a sports bra and her warm-up jacket on, or not the jacket, but she still had a sports bra or something. The upper body clothing was on her, but you are pretty sure from your recollection it was not. And even if it was on her...
I don't believe it was.
Right.
But I'll tell you, I have no visualization skills. I cannot see pictures in my head.
That's fine.
So I remember based on my memory, not based on any visual that I can go back to.
That's totally fine. Even if it was on her body, at an autopsy, they would have removed it. So,
Right.
Yeah. So I am under the impression that there's one article of clothing, which I believe would be the pants, that were still around, and the rest of the clothing. And that's why I was like, well, I'm not even sure there's anything on the other clothing that would have been of evidentiary value. But of course, you would want the opportunity to test it, so you don't want it destroyed. But what was...
Well, it would be nowadays, because you would figure that she would fight some, and that it's the upper body clothing that would have left any
right.
Skin cells and stuff like that.
Right. Which of course it's come such a long way.
Especially if she was choked.
Right. And it's come such a long way. DNA testing has come such a long way. So this blood smear did not belong to her or Stuart Milburn. There could be lots of ways, blood gets on clothing. She taught little kids. Little kids.
Yeah, we're a martial arts studio.
Yeah.
It's plenty of ways that blood could get on.
Lots of ways. Little kids scrape knee. It's a very close contact sport. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Blood could come from anywhere.
Right. Exactly. There's lots of ways. I'm always fascinated by. It's like, oh, look, we found blood in the bathroom. Well, it's like, yeah, you jerk. I cut myself shaving. I mean, there's, lots of ways that she could have had another person's blood on her, a blood smear. And we're not talking like a gallon of blood splashed on her clothes, a blood smear. It happens. Who knows where it could have come from? A lot of,
right.
I'm not willing to say that that's, such an important thing. The fact that the clothing.
I don't think it would have been, because there was no evidence that he would have been bleeding.
Right.
So, so why would he have blood?
So if she was bludgeoned and strangled, and I'm just going to ask this, and you may not, I know this is conjecture, but him being so much taller than her, and he is a male, so even though she is, has ninja-like skills that she can, move quickly, she may not be able to overpower someone, twice her size. Would he have potentially strangled her from behind? Would there have been a way that he could have done it?
It would have been from behind.
Okay. Would it have been
that's the type of holds that we taught.
Okay. I was going to say, would he have used his bare hands, or would he have used like the crook of his elbow, or would there have been,
It would have been his elbow.
Okay.
So we actually, I had to testify to that in court.
Okay.
And they actually made me demonstrate the chokeholds.
I bet they did. I bet they did. I have to say, you really figured prominently in a lot of the articles I found. I was like, this man is everywhere. That's why it was just like, this is such a rare opportunity to get to talk to you. Someone who knew the victim and the person of interest, who, found her. I mean, who, thought so highly of her.
Well, I will tell you in the beginning, even though I don't believe the sheriffs really thought that I was involved, that a lot of people thought I was.
Well, how can,
And so there's a lot of articles written that use my name as potential something. And I would walk around and, if I'm with someone, they'd be like, do you know the owner of that place? We heard he did it. I'm like, I did not do it.
I will tell you, I have found nothing in my research that points to you at all. Everything I have, even any kind of slight suspicion, in any kind of investigation.
I'll tell you why it came about. So, in the preliminary, I believe it was the preliminary hearing, the headlines on the Signal was martial arts instructor on trial for murder, or whatever it may say. And then it had my picture sitting on the stand, and then it had his picture below it. But then they folded all the papers in half and put them in all the newspaper stands, and so it was only my picture and the headlines. And I was really well known.
Right. You were.
So,
you still are. And I will tell you, everything I've read said what an important piece of the puzzle you are, and your testimony and testifying. Honestly, I haven't seen, one thing at all that, and I get you were probably under the hot lamp for a while, and that with any kind of investigation, you have to start close and move out. You start close to home.
I think from the sheriff's department, I was out of the lamp within 3 days.
Okay.
But I don't think with the general public I was.
Well,
so
I get that.
I'll tell you a little inside story that most people don't know. So about 2 days after the murder, I can't sleep at night. And so we had a gentleman at our Taekwondo studio who was a lieutenant, I believe that was his rank, in the Beverly Hills PD. And he was close to me at the time. And so I called him at 2:00 in the morning. And I said, listen, I got to talk to you. Get up. So we went and met, and we just sat and talked for hours. And I told him, I said, my fear is everything that comes back to me was how I found the body and where he was, changes that I've seen already, just little different details of everything for those 2 days led me to him. But one of the things he taught me that night is that you don't try and figure out who did it. If you have a suspect, you do everything you can to eliminate that person. And if you can't eliminate them, then they move up the suspect list a little bit. And so then that's what we started doing with all of his actions. And so every day I would report every action from before, during, and after, things I remembered that day, that we found the body, anything that popped in my mind. And then I would talk, like I said, to the sheriff's department basically every day, or the detectives involved, and said, listen, this is unique. This has changed. This is how his personality has changed. This is what he's doing different today than what he would have done a week ago. And I knew him really well. He was my roommate at one time.
Right.
So his personality completely changed right after the murder.
Tell me what you mean.
So he wasn't like a positive person. And then all of a sudden you go in, and he had a desk at the studio, and right by his desk, it had all these positive sayings that he just all of a sudden put up on the wall, and how to be a better man. And I mean, just glaring things he would have never put up on his wall.
Oh, wow.
So every time I saw anything, I just constantly reported it to him. Anything
like, don't kill people? Anything like that? Like, trying to talk himself out?
No, it was kidding.
I'm just kidding.
Like 10 traits, yeah. But it was bizarre. I mean, it was totally opposite of what his personality was.
Right.
So then I kind of kept track of that every day that he came in.
I think those things are very important. When you said changes, I was thinking something that's very subtle. I was thinking something much bigger in his personality, things like that changed. But that's a very subtle thing, and it's interesting that you noticed it, and I'm glad you did. And I'm sure the detectives thought you were a fount of knowledge for them.
Well, we had a memorial service for that week, and he supported everything of the studio. Mm-hmm. Because I will tell you, with his personality, I don't think he was liked in his real life outside the Taekwondo studio. And this is a place where he went, and we basically taught him how to be a leader, and people appreciated him. And so I think this is the first time in his life that he felt that way.
Wow.
So the Taekwondo studio was really important to him. And he would support anything. Well, when we had the memorial service, he didn't come.
Wow. That's kind of a big one.
I reported that one pretty quick too. I think he showed up and then left instantly.
I think he probably showed who he was a lot, whether he realized it or not.
Yeah, and what I think happened was I think he did care about the students, and he didn't realize the devastation it was going to have on the people of the studio and a lot of the people who he cared about at the studio who also loved her.
Yeah.
And when he started seeing that devastation, it started hurting him as a person and started, somewhat motivating him for a change, plus what I would consider a pretty major event, So, I mean, it was just a complete metamorphosis. Now, could that happen just because of someone died that he knew? It could, but, he was the one who changed personalities. The rest of us didn't.
Right. That's a very astute point. So how long after Veronica's death did he work with you or for you?
So the sheriff's department, I was going to get rid of him right away. And the sheriff's department said, listen, if you get rid of him, we'll never know any of the changes.
Right.
So we want you to keep him on as an employee. And, that made it really hard for me.
That's tough. Yeah.
So what I did is I suspended him from, not rudely suspended, but I just looked at him and said, listen, there's a lot of things going on right now. I said, there's people who suspect you. There's people who suspect me. So
right.
I can't have you teach classes. It's not good for the studio. So I just want you to stay in the back office.
That's smart.
And then we're still concerned because if he's crazy enough to do that, then would he come in if he's truly, his motivation is, he's so upset that he may be losing the studio. Now is he even more upset? So one of our instructors was an ex-Marine, and he had a book that he brought up. Those old zip-up organizers?
Sure.
That we used to have back in the day?
I do.
So he cleaned it all out, and he kept a weapon in there, and he kept it at the front of the class with him at all times.
Oh, my God.
And then I kept a weapon on me at all times, and that was the first time people thought I dressed so good it was ridiculous because they'd never seen me dressing in sports jackets every day. But I had a weapon because our concern was we didn't want any of our students to be in danger.
What a difficult position for you to be in. I mean, I'm impressed with all that you've done and all you've been through. So mentioning the students, what do you believe happened with this student who testified that she saw Stuart slipping a Christmas card into her purse at the time that Veronica...
Right. So this was a great young couple that was training. So he had gone technically home that night. They said they remember, if I remember the story correctly, that when they were stretching, which would have been the time of her death, is the estimate.
Yep.
That they remember him putting cards, and they obviously got the card.
Yep.
But we had an instructor who talked to me and said, I think I put those cards in there. He goes, I can't remember, though, because by the time that part come out, it was months later.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wasn't sure, but he actually thinks that he took the cards off Milburn's desk because he knew those people were there that night and just put it into their sparring bags or their workout bags.
No, that's interesting because the female
But
witness,
that never came up in court.
The female witness said that she remembers him slipping cards into her bag at 8:20, which I'm really good at time. And even before, like, I've never worn a watch in my life until now, and I wear an Apple Watch, and it's basically just as a steps tracker, a fitness tracker. I don't sit and say all of my wonderful gifts, but one of my gifts since I was a kid is to know the time. I can't explain it, but I wouldn't be near a clock and somebody would say, do you know what time it is? And I would say 1:20. And I may be at most 5 minutes off, but I'm telling you, I know the time. I couldn't tell you at, specifically 8:20, I saw someone slipping a card into my bag unless they were stretching and there was a clock. As you said, I didn't know that they were stretching. Yeah, go ahead.
So they were stretching at the beginning of class. So that would have been in the first 20 minutes of class.
Okay.
There was a clock there, and they knew the class started at 8 o'clock. So it would be easy to assume 8:20, even if you didn't see the clock to be exactly 8:20.
Okay.
Because we pretty much had a pretty set routine for all the instructors.
Tight schedule.
Of how much warm-up time, stretch time, and then open time for them to work on whatever they felt like the class needed to work on.
Gotcha.
So it was a pretty structured program.
So she may have saw someone, and in her mind it was Stuart because maybe the cards came from Stuart, and maybe she just, it could have just been mistaken. I don't know that she was trying to defend him, because as you say,
I think it was just a mistake. They're good people.
Right.
They wouldn't have defended him.
Right. And they loved both Stuart and Veronica.
I do think it was a huge piece of the case, though.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. So I know you're not, you don't have a career in law enforcement, but what would you want to see happen now, other than the person who did this, whether it's Stuart or someone else? What would you want to happen right now?
Well, I would love, whoever it is, which I believe would be Stuart, but whoever it is, if they could prove that they did it, I would want them to prove that they did it and put them away for life.
Right.
That's just, I'm not about it has to be Stuart, even though everything that I went through during those times and everyone I talked to and all the evidence at the time that I got to see every day all led to him.
He's still a resident of Southern California. He, I don't know if his parents are deceased or if they put this large chateau mansion in a trust, but he sold in his name this very large mansion in the San Gabriel Valley, and he now lives in San Bernardino County and has a home there. So he's still in Southern California. I don't know anything about what he's doing now. Do you have any knowledge of what he's doing?
I do not.
Yeah. I was wondering if after, the trial, if he attempted to contact you. I mean, to, have two trials and in a hung jury is just, it's pretty rare. I mean, and I'd even looked up just for my own, edification, like what's the longest a jury ever was out. And apparently it's a Southern California case. It wasn't a murder trial, but it was in Long Beach. It took 11 years to get to trial, and it took 6 months of testimony and 4.5 months of jury deliberation.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a long
time.
I know, that's a long time. So he, gets out twice, and I will say I have no, I understand Judge Horan's frustration, but he poisoned most everything after the second hung jury when he said, it's pretty clear that...
It's obvious you did this crime.
Yes! it's pretty clear he did this crime, and don't bring this before my court again unless you have other evidence. Now that's...
And I think part of what he was saying was, you guys destroyed all the evidence.
Right.
So based on what's out there, you're not going to get a conviction. And
right.
I agree with that. I don't think... I didn't sit in the trial. I sat in the hallway the whole time, which was, let me tell you, just lovely.
I bet a lot of fun.
But, I read all the transcripts of the trial, and I wouldn't have convicted him either.
Right. No, you had said that. You had said that, yeah, in our conversation.
It was just such a flimsy case that was so easy to pick apart, and I thought the prosecutor did a great job with the information that he had. I mean, it was one of the things that the prosecutor did at the end, because once it got to the end, I got to sit in there, so I got to hear the closing arguments.
Oh, awesome.
Is he basically said, he wrote down this board and said, okay, we're going to start with everybody in the world or whatever, and we're just going to eliminate it and keep eliminating people until there's only one left. Right. And basically, he showed how it couldn't have been anybody else, even though there was no set physical evidence on the crime.
Right. Yeah, I mean...
And so I thought that was pretty impressive, but I could understand how if I was a juror in a deliberating room, how I would have to listen to both sides. And I'm prejudiced at that point
of course.
with my knowledge and stuff, and I still thought it was a weak case.
Which is, just shows who you are, your temperament and your personality, that even though you are, pretty clear on what happened and who did it, you still know how the justice system works, and that you can't convict someone without enough evidence. Even, I mean, we can say we think we know who did it, 100 times, and that doesn't mean that it's true. And, I think that's an amazing thing, considering you knew both of them so well, you worked with them, you had affection for both of them. I mean, it's a difficult place you were put in, and then to see justice not done, and truly not done in this case, is got to be heartbreaking. And all I can do is hope that someone hearing this, someone within the sound of our voices, has something, knows something, heard something, saw something, and comes forward, because this one, in the words of the detective who now has this case, it's been far too long. This case needs to be solved. And he's right. It needs to be solved. So I can't thank you enough, Ken Lewis. What an amazing opportunity for me to speak to you about this case, someone who knows so much. I'm really grateful for you coming on today. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sometimes when you think you're done with an interview, something pops back up and you need to include it. And after we were done speaking with Ken, he called me and said, I forgot to mention that a month or so after Veronica's murder, a family who were students at the Taekwondo studio approached me and said that Stuart Milburn had asked them to be his alibi. He was apparently a private instructor to one of their children, and a month or so after Veronica's murder, the parents came to Ken and said, by the way, we want you to know that Stuart asked if we could provide an alibi for him for that evening.
Wow.
And Ken said, well, you need to tell the sheriff's department immediately. And they did not. So Ken did. So the sheriff's department is aware, and I'm hoping that all these years later, maybe with their child having grown to be an adult, and maybe they have shaken off some fear, maybe they'll come forward, because this case is so close to being able to be tried correctly for the third time. Maybe third time's the charm. So if you know anything, if you heard anything, if you saw anything, even if you think it is very small and inconsequential, you don't know how important it might be to this case, please call the LA County Sheriff's Department Homicide Bureau at 323-890-5500. And more cowbell.
If you'd like to support Just the Tipsters, go to patreon.com/Just the Tipsters.